see a PowerPoint that says storytelling in games.
I can see it now.
You see it now?
Yeah, I can see it. Cade, your microphone's a little low.
It is? How do I turn it up? Like,
Maybe you talk closer to the microphone? I'm not sure.
a headset.
Oh.
It's a server
Should I
setting.
just start chewing on my microphone? Will that work?
Maybe.
Is his did you set his user volume low, Brandon?
No, it's at max.
User volume means not like a server setting. It's only a person by person setting.
Because he sounds fine to me.
Okay.
Is your volume low on your computer?
Maybe.
God damn it, Anthony.
That was Brandon.
Yeah, that's Brandon.
I can't tell the difference between the two.
I can't either. All right. It's 12:05 now. I think probably good enough to start going. I think we got everyone who's going to be in here.
Okay. So, welcome everyone to the worst presentation of the semester. My name is Cade, and I will be presenting to you storytelling in games and how to achieve that.
Ooh.
So, first I want to ask you guys a question. Why do you think a game needs a writer? When you hear about a game having a writer, what do you think that means? What is the writer doing? I am expecting an answer from you guys, so just put something in chat.
Let's see.
When you're
making fan fiction,
ask yourself why the game needs a story. If you've joined a game as a writer, what do you expect to be doing and why? So, anybody? No? Okay, moving on.
If it doesn't have a story, it's kind of like pretty boring.
Yeah, story keeps people engaged.
Exactly. So there are three main approaches to storytelling I'm going to go over today. The first is just using games to tell a story. Here the story is absolute, and the games are chosen as a medium to deliver the story. Now, what I mean is that the story always comes first before the mechanics. The mechanics of the game are going to be secondary. So instead of asking what you want the player to do, ask how you can convey the story to the player through the mechanics. So a good example of this are the games by BioWare, such as Dragon Age and Mass Effect. Each game has an active player protagonist where you're encouraged to make choices, but each playthrough follows the same story beats, where you go through the same main quests and then eventually fight the same final boss. But each story feels unique to you based on the choices you make. And then as you go from Mass Effect 1 to Mass Effect 2 and 3, each game has slightly different mechanics, such as the first one having things where you could gather material and a vehicle mechanic that they dropped in the other two games because it just wasn't that important enough to the story. And then a good thought experiment to think of that is when you have a game, if you took away the mechanics of the game, would the story be affected? As in, do you really need to have a game to tell a story? You guys understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, good so far.
Okay, great. I now know how my teachers feel. The second approach is using story to enhance your game. So here, the delivery of the story is just going to be playing the game. Revolutionary idea. The pacing is going to be loose. There's no main quest for the player to pursue because the main quest is just playing the game. The story serves to add context to the game. You want to make the player care about the mechanics that you have, what they're doing, and the atmosphere, the art style, and such that you have in the game. Over time, you distribute the story elements where the player is given time to inhabit the world between the different story beats. You guys understand that? Okay, great.
Yep.
So a good recent example of this is the game Hades. I'm not sure if many of you played that. Anybody?
I have not.
Well, it's a great
Unfortunately
game.
not, yeah.
You all should play it. So
It just came out recently, right?
Yeah, it came out like 2 weeks ago.
Wow.
So in each game, the player, you essentially do a run through a dungeon to get to the end of the dungeon. And that's the game. And every time you die, you get a little bit of more story each time, where you have different conversations, and eventually you form your own understanding of what you're doing in that dungeon.
Hmm.
And
What a
finally,
bad example. What would be a bad example of it?
a bad example of that,
Yeah.
I think. I would have to say something where
Oh no.
they give you the entire story up front and then just tell you to go into the game. So, like, I can't really think of a example per se, but I know what it would look like. It would look like where you have this long, like, lengthy exposition where people are just talking at you, and then they say, "Go do this," and then the player spends the rest of the game just doing that, and they don't have any sustained motivation of what they would be doing. You understand?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I know I've seen games. I've seen games like that. I just can't remember one right now.
Right. It's
So like Lego Star Wars, where it starts out where it just does the entire Star Wars intro for like 5 minutes, and then it says go play the game.
Well, no, because you're playing through the story of the Star Wars games. You have different levels.
Oh, I could say Dragon March for Death is a great example of that, but you've probably never heard of the game. They give you like 15 minutes of opening cutscene dialogue, and then they just give you like 50 different quests to complete and connect none of them together.
Yeah, that's it. That's exactly what I'm talking about. Okay. So then the third example is where the game and story are completely in sync. Everything is working as a finely tuned machine. One of the key things is that every mechanic in the game makes sense for the purposes of the game. For example, how many of you have played the Elder Scrolls where you're playing as the Chosen One and you have to collect herbs to make a potion? Why is the Chosen One spending his time doing that? Well, a game that would have like a sync between the story and the mechanics would be like The Witcher, where you need to get the herbs because you need to make a potion and an oil to help you slay the monsters. And there's that fine connection between the different mechanics in the story, where it all makes sense. Again, another big thing about where you have the game and the story in sync is that you would have environmental storytelling. So instead of just having like a lot of dialogue and exposition, you would have different environments that would tell you more about the story and the world that you're inhabiting. Because the big thing is, in games like this, the player does not have total control. You're not really the chosen one, and you're not really going to defeat the big giant evil and completely change the world. You are an inhabitant of the world, where you have a specific role in the story, and that's going to determine what you're going to do. Again, it's like The Witcher 3, where you play as the Witcher and you go slay monsters, but you can't like kill the king if you want to. I know there's a quest where you do that, but just like it makes sense. So, here are some things to consider when you're making your story. During your design phase, ask yourself, what are you trying to accomplish in this game? What is your end goal? Do you simply just want to tell a story of people? Do you just want to make them feel like afraid if you're doing a horror game, or do you want to make them feel that like rush of like completing these challenges, like in Space Invader, where you try to like destroy the Space Invaders? You know what I'm talking about. Again, I told you this is going to be the worst presentation.
You're doing great.
The second thing is you want to imagine playing the game and always keep in mind the player's perspective. Why should I care about the mechanics of your game and the different things I'm able to do? If I'm playing Spider-Man, I care about swinging like webs from different buildings because I'm Spider-Man. It makes sense. If it's just some like random mechanic to get you from point A to point B, well, I don't actually care about it because it's not really serving me as a player. And then you end up forgetting about it. You don't have this like emotional attachment to it. The third thing is you need to maintain the player's attention, not lose their attention, and don't get in the way of the game. So again, returning to what I said earlier, you can't have this like giant exposition at the beginning of the game, then turn the player loose, because you need to be able to guide them to have an experience where they can do what they want, but not lose track of what they want. If you understand what I'm saying.
Yeah.
The fourth thing is, and I see this every year, there's always a game that gets completely carried away, where they have this like giant 20-hour plus story that they spend the first 4 weeks developing, and then they can't deliver on it. So you want to set your expectations where you develop a story over time. You don't just want to put it at the front end. You want to develop the game with the story, so that by the end of like a few weeks, you would have a game that you can play and then add to. Which leads into my tips for getting started. Again, you have like the design and polish process, which is what I'm talking about. Because every game in the world, it's not finished until it actually gets out of the studio and is put into the player's hands. And even then, there's going to be a patch later down the road. So each design and polish cycle, you focus on creating the game, fixing what you did last time, and then adding to it. So that one, you're able to get ahead of problems that develop, and two, you're also able to maintain it where you can still change course later on. Like if you suddenly find a problem and things are working out, it doesn't become a bigger problem down the road. So you want to approach stories like you're developing your game and set milestones for what you want to do. And then the other thing I want to talk about is, just general creativity. The best advice I ever got as a writer was that if I see something I like, there is nothing that's going to stop me from taking that thing, filing off the serial numbers, and then saying that it's mine. Because yeah, exactly. Because if I see it, I'm already thinking of ways I can use it in a unique way that actually hasn't been done before, because it hasn't. Like I'm asking myself, well, wait, I think this should happen, but that's not what happened. You get it? That belongs to me. So creatively speaking, you can do that. You're allowed to work from reference, and it's not plagiarism or anything like that.
Hmm.
And now I'm going to open it for questions, and I am completely sympathetic to the teaching system now.
That feeling when you're in a Zoom call and you're the only person talking as a teacher?
Yes, and you can't see their faces.
Makes it always really hard doing this all online.
Yes.
See.
It's very awkward.
Name it all.
Is
You
it
can just type in
anything
chat.
regarding the length of a story towards the size of the game?
Are you talking about for a club game or just a game in general?
Like, okay, your game, you have a limited amount of time that you could have gameplay without going way too long for any single game, and you have an limited.
I get
So
it.
there's also probably a limited amount of story that you could put towards that game. Is there? If you were to make a ratio of story to gameplay, what would it be?
Well, again, it depends on the game you're making. If you're talking about an open world game where majority of the game is just, grinding through quests and getting materials, you would have main story be like 10 or 20%, and then the rest of the time spending is, doing side quests and getting materials, Like in Genshin Impact, like how long do you actually spend on the main story versus how much do you actually just go through the grind?
Every day spent in the abyss.
Yes, exactly. And then on the opposite side of the spectrum, you have games like Life is Strange or trying to think of another one, Dragon Age, where every action of the player, whether they like it or not, is devoted to achieving the main story, such as like leveling up so you can go through the main quest line and eventually
Dawn?
get to the final boss.
Would Until Dawn be considered a game like that?
I haven't played Until Dawn. Can you describe it quick?
It's a horror game, but it's sort of like each choice matters and different endings based on that.
Yeah, I guess that could be described that way. Anything else? Does anyone just have like problems with their game and want to talk about it?
What about games where the story is by no means the central plot point at all, and you try making the player find the story? Things I can give an example of are like the Kirby series and the Mega Man series, where they literally don't put much going on until you like actually go to the pause menu and read the descriptions or interact with NPCs who are just randomly scattered out of the way. What's your opinion on that?
Well, yeah, that was that second approach that I was talking about, where you have the game mechanics and then you add the story to enhance the mechanics. So, like with Mega Man, you're mainly just shooting things and running around, and then you add the story about it, so you care about shooting things and running around. You understand?
Yeah.
Another good example is Subnautica and Abyssea, where it's underwater exploration and there isn't really a story per se, but you go through these sort of mini quests, and little by little, the story becomes apparent to you. All right. Anybody else?
Please sign into the attendance because I just sent the link, even though I had it open on my computer this whole time. I never sent the link. So there it is.
It is attendance time.
Yes.
Sign into the attendance, you fools.
People that don't sign in will be penalized.
17 lashes.
100 years locked in the stockade.
Oh my gosh, this attendance sheet is big.
It's getting big.
We've never actually had an attendance sheet this big.
Also, what about games like Hollow Knight, where they never really explicitly tell you the story of like what's going on? It's just sort of like you have to try and piece it together in the game, because not a lot of people talk to you in that game. It's just sort of like you gotta look at what's going on around you and like the items.
Yeah, well then the player is like filling in the gaps. You're how do I word this? The player is projecting their own stories onto the little Hollow Knight dude, and eventually they get a new story beat as they play the game, and that adds to it. So again, it's maintaining the player's attention and investment in the game.
I see.
Which approach would you recommend taking and when?
Well, again, it varies from story to story. And really, when you're designing your game, you should have a pretty good idea of what you want to do to begin with. So, yeah. For example, if it's something where you really want the player to hear the story that's you want to have told, do the first one, where it's have the idea of what you want to have happen, and then design the mechanics to support that. The second one is where you have a really good idea of the mechanics, and then you want to make people really care about it. So you allow them to project their own interests into the game by keeping the story kind of loose and not overly descriptive. Anybody else?
All right. Thank you for the presentation today, Cade.
Thank you.
So
That's very good.
I hope everyone takes this into account when trying to make a storyline for their game. I know we got quite a bit of story-heavy games this semester, so definitely hope it was of use to you guys. So next meeting is this Friday at same time, 1 p.m. And I don't think there's any special announcements that we got for that. Alana, is there anything we need for social media?
Anyone who's part of Spare Parts, your showcase is tomorrow, so I need stuff.
Spare Parts, give us stuff. All right, other than that, I think we should be good. Thank you guys all for coming, and see you Friday.